Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the January 29th, 2025 City Council work session. Thank you for joining us in this virtual meeting format today. For work sessions like this one, there is no opportunity for public comment, and those wishing to access the meeting can do so by watching the live stream available on our website, the broadcast on Comcast Channel 21, or by calling into one of the phone numbers that are listed for this meeting on the public webcasts and meeting materials page of the City of Eugene website. Thank you all again for joining us. And with that, I call the January 29th, 2025 City Council work session to order. We have two agenda items on our work session agenda today, and I'm now going to turn it over to the city manager and staff to introduce the first topic.
Thank you, Mayor. As you might recall, last week we had a work session on your legislative priorities, but we periodically also need to meet with the full council to talk about more specific details around bills. And so with that, I'm going to ask our intergovernmental relations manager, Ethan Nelson, to sort of lead that discussion on a couple of bills we want more input on.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. Good afternoon. I think, yep, it is now afternoons. Mayor Knudsen and City Councilors, good to see you all. Again, Ethan Nelson, your Intergovernmental Relations Manager. So this work session is in response to the Council's Intergovernmental Relations Committee's direction from their October 2024 meeting, which basically they passed a motion to schedule, quote, and my quote, schedule a council work session after council winter break on the position of the city to repeal House Bill 3115. Additionally, from their November 2024 meeting, they gave direction to, quote, bring to City Council the proposed legislation that will prohibit the charging of rental application screening fees statewide for discussion and direction. So today before you are two bills that have been introduced at the Oregon legislature that I'm seeking your guidance on. The majority of this work session is for your deliberation and discussion. City staff are available to provide responses to technical questions as necessary, and to assist with the clear discussion, we're asking council to discuss and take action on each item separately. Background information and previous council actions were included in the agenda item summary for today's work session, as were copies of the two introduced bills. Staff is seeking direction from council on whether to support, oppose, or remain neutral towards these bills. So that's just kind of setting the table for what the discussion is. And, I've got colleagues that are on the call that can respond to any technical questions, but we're really hoping that that conversation will be focused with you all. And the first item that we are seeking input on is House Bill 2967, and that would amend the Oregon Residential Landlord Tenant Act to prohibit residential landlords from collecting an applicant screening charge. So that one's the first one, and I'll turn it back to you, Mayor Knudsen, for discussion. After action on this item, I can provide an overview of our second bill. Thanks.
Great, thank you, City Manager and staff. So as just mentioned, we'll have discussion and then a motion on this first item, continued or any further discussion from council, and then we'll take a vote, and then we'll head back to discuss the second bill. So with that, I will open the floor for council questions, and if councilors would be willing in discussion or in rounds to indicate or give a sense of where you are relative to your support, opposition, or neutrality related to this bill, that'll help us to develop a clean motion coming out of this first discussion and again in the second. So, Councilor Keating.
Thank you, Mayor. It's more of an inquiry before we dive into discussion. Can we, because I'm in transit and it's difficult to look up, can we just get from our IGR director who is sponsoring or co-chief sponsoring, or who's a chief sponsor, who's co-chief, and who's sponsoring House Bill 2967, please?
Thank you, Councilor Keating. Mayor Knudsen, the chief sponsors for House Bill 2967 are Representative Mark Gamba and Senator Chris Gorsuch, and so those are the two chief sponsors, and no local members of our delegation have signed on to the bill to date, and it has not been scheduled for a hearing yet.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Appreciate that.
Councillor Kaczynski.
Yes, thank you so much. This is just at this point just a question. We passed a cap on these applications, a few $10, correct? And that was appealed. We were told it's fine, you can do it, but now it's kind of hanging out at the Supreme Court. We don't know whether the Supreme Court's going to take it up or not. We're not currently enforcing that cap, right? Is that correct? Okay.
It's all correct, Councillor Kaczynski.
Is there a sense of at what point the Supreme Court not taking this up would make us comfortable with saying, okay, we're going to start enforcing that cap?
Well, that's a great question. The Supreme Court is not under any particular timeline to make a decision about whether or not they will hear the appeal. So it's really kind of up to them, and I can't predict for you when that decision will come down. As of this morning, still no word.
Okay.
So in terms of the decision not to enforce it, that is the city could make a different decision, but to date, we have chosen not to enforce because there are financial consequences to limiting landlords' collection of applicant screening charges if, in the end, the Supreme Court were to disagree with the Court of Appeals and determine that the city did not have the authority to do that. So we're trying to sort of limit the scope of potential damages until we have a final answer.
Okay, and then if this bill passes at the state level, that sort of alleviates all of our obligations and responsibilities on this topic, be the state's responsibility to enforce, to have any sort of legal liabilities that may come out of it. Is that accurate?
That's accurate. That this bill would answer the question and dictate that applicant screening charges are not allowed in any amount.
Thank you.
Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess, Ethan, the answer to your question is that my feelings on the matter would, I guess, be best characterized as neutral. I understand the reason for it. Boy, is it hard when you're looking for a place to live to have to pay all of the application fees. Totally understand that. Generally speaking, I think it's a bad idea when the government gets involved in this particular market. I think the outcomes tend, although oftentimes very well-meaning, the outcomes inevitably end up negative for the people who have to deal with it as a result. But I say it's better as a statewide issue and a statewide law than at a local level or a city level. So that's why I say I suppose I would be neutral on that. I would tend to lean against the idea in general, but neutral on this particular bill, I suppose, is most accurate. Thank you.
Councillor Leach.
Thank you. I do have a question. The bill language says landlords may not charge an application fee, but there are third-party platforms like Zillow or apartments.com, or there's a lot of different places that you can go to look for an apartment or a home that charge maybe a one-time background check fee, and then an applicant can then just do that one time and apply to any number of homes across as many as they want for that one fee. So the landlord is not charging a fee, but the third-party platform is charging a screening fee. How is that handled within this bill, if you can know?
That's a great question, Councillor Leach. And ultimately, I think questions of that detail would be up to the state agency that would be charged with enforcing this law. But I will say that the bill itself says that a landlord may not require payment of an applicant screening charge. So certainly not directly, possibly not indirectly, if there, were some requirement that an applicant move through a process that in order to apply that requires payment of a charge.
Yeah, I mean, I'm generally supportive of this bill. I think I would need to know that answer because, I mean, to agree with Councilor Clark in that we don't know the full ramifications if instead of paying one $35 fee, now people have to go and do they have to pay for their own background check to submit to landlords, or does every landlord have to pay for every background check for every single applicant? That's a huge consideration because it's, it can be $25 to $50 per person, and that's per person, per adult in the unit. And so I don't want to see application screening fees where some of these management companies are like, yeah, $50 per person just to apply. Don't want to see that. But I also don't like the fact that there's not that much detail in this. So I will say that I do support the bill with reservations.
Councilor Ye.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. So yeah, I have pretty similar thoughts to the folks who've already chimed in, and we've already talked about this a lot at our own table about how applications fees create significant barriers for folks who are low income and those trying to get out of homelessness. And studies have shown how it is very common for folks to not apply to certain housing options from fear of getting rejected. And so we're seeing some housing segregation based on the fear of losing application fees. So it's definitely an issue I think is important. A couple of states have already done this, so I don't think it's an abnormal thing to do. And while I do think there are questions and probably some work that needs to be done on it, I'm generally in favor of doing this, like Councilor Clark was saying, at a state level, rather than have every municipality kind of having a different strategy and making it really confusing for folks who are trying to move between communities. So I would be in favor of supporting it at this time. Yeah, sorry, it's been a long morning. So that's it. Thanks.
No problem at all. And I'm going to, Councilor Keating, if you wouldn't mind, I'm going to ask Councilor Zelenka if he would have his first round first, and then I'll come back to you. Councilor Zelenka. Councilor Zelenka, you're still muted, if you can hear me.
There we go. Yeah, a couple more years, I'll get this down. This definitely is a problem for those who pay, especially if you're low income or homeless. It does create barriers, as Councilor Ye said. I think where government intervenes and things like this is where the market's either broken or to ensure fairness or to prevent discrimination. This kind of fits within that bigger rubric. There's no perfect solution to this. This bill's not perfect, but and I supported the $10 limit when we did it locally, but given our status of that not being implemented, I'm supportive of this piece of legislation. It's consistent enough with where we've been for me to be supportive of it with reservations. I think a statewide law makes a lot of sense, and then you don't have different jurisdictions doing different things all over the place, and if you're having to deal with a whole bunch of different rules. So I guess I'm supportive of it as well.
Councilor Keating.
Thank you, Mayor. I concur with the sentiments of the vast majority of my colleagues who support this concept. I would long to see not only statewide law address this issue and rein in the unscrupulous practice of homes being put out on the market to rent with screening fees attached, and then no follow-up and no return of the resources that were spent out by the prospective tenant. A statewide one-stop shop seems to make a lot of sense, and so I'd like to see the evolution of this bill, and I conceptually, especially as the only current renter on council, conceptually, I'm enthusiastic about this concept, about this bill. And yet I could make and am making an argument about where we put our energy, and what we can get in when we have a finite amount of time and a significant amount of resources to advocate for. Is it in our interest to go all in and put IGR's efforts into advocating for this, or do we, know when to hold them, know when to fold them? Do we put our energy and resources into securing more resources for the municipality? So I could argue both, but it's either an enthusiastic yes or a neutral at this juncture. And that being said, if I were to vote right now, I would vote in the affirmative, but I would also ask, if we are neutral at this juncture and more of our Lane County delegation jumps on board, what's the process or the timeline of changing our status from neutral to yes in the near future?
Mayor Knutson and Councilor Keating, I'll jump in on that one. The way that I look at this is we're really trying to get council's direction on what our position is in terms of opposed, neutral, support. In regards to then the prioritization, I would reference then council's operating agreements related to the Intergovernmental Relations Committee, and if this body during this deliberation says we want to, oppose or neutral or support, and we want it to be a priority, you can do that. Otherwise, if you say, hey, we're going to take a position, and then I go and I do the work that I do with the committee, the IGR committee, to come back and say, okay, how do you want to prioritize this? Do you want this to become something that is on our top 6, our top 5, that's going to take a good amount of my direction and my engagement, or is it something that's going to be a lower priority? That deliberation happens, and if that body, following the protocols outlined in the council operating agreements, if that body can't come to an agreement, a unanimous agreement, then it would be then moved back to this body for deliberation, discussion, and direction. So at this point, I would say that hopefully that puts some side, and for me right now, whatever I get, I'm not putting it into the priority category. I just need to have a position so when we're asked, and we have been asked, and we will be asked, that I have a response.
As was anticipated, that's incredibly helpful, Ethan. Thank you. So, Mayor, if you're doing a head count or getting the temperature of the room, I would put myself in the wholly supportive category at this juncture and let IGR wrestle with the priority.
Councilor Yeh.
I was just gonna, I think Councilor Keating kind of came to the same, and Ethan helped. That we've already talked about our priorities. You've all seen the list, and I would not anticipate that this would rise to the level of something where we'd be asking Ethan to spend a lot of time on it. Of course, I'm just one of 3 people on the IGR, but that is just my personal opinion, that we have some really high priorities that we've already set. But I would want Ethan, if someone were to ask him, do you guys support this, that he would know what our response is. I think that's important.
Thank you all. So based on what I'm hearing from council at this point, there's a position of support in this moving into our typical IGR process relative to other priorities. And with that, then I think I will pass this over. Well, Councilor Evans, yes.
Yeah. I want to agree with Councilor Yeh on this. We have a set list of priorities right now with IGR. I think that, you know, given head nods and that kind of thing, that we would be supportive of this, but not as a top priority item.
Very helpful summary, Council President. Thank you. With that, I think I will then put this back to you and ask the Council President to put a motion forward.
Mayor, I would like to, I don't have my
I can read that.
agenda in front of me. I just came from another meeting, and I'm kind of at a loss for, you know, things. I just hopped on the call now, so.
That is no problem at all, Councilor. I will read the motion to you that we have in our agenda, which is move to, as Council has indicated, support the legislative effort to adopt House Bill 2967.
So
Well, so moved. So
Thank you.
yeah, go.
Second.
Thank you very much. Any further discussion related to this item? Appreciate all of the comments very much thus far. Then with that, we'll take a vote for this motion. All in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All opposed? 1, and the motion passes with a vote of 6-1. Thank you all. With that, I'm going to ask staff if they would briefly introduce the second bill for discussion.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Knutson. So the second item is on Senate Bill 593. And to Councilor Keating's earlier question, that is the chief sponsor is Senator Mark Meek. And that would repeal the statute, which is ORS 195.530, that was enacted by House Bill 3115 from the 2021 session. So if there's need to have more background on that, just let me know. But it's all in the AIS, and I'm assuming that folks have been reviewed, briefed on this.
No.
Okay. Thank you, staff, for that very brief introduction. Open the floor for council questions. Councilor Clark. Councilor, you're still muted, just in case. Thank you.
Wow. Okay, there we go. Sorry, Ethan, to make you go through it, and thank you, Mayor. I did not read what 3515 description. Could you remind me again what that ORS deals with, please?
Certainly, Mayor Knutson, Councilor Clark. So I'm just going to pull from the AIS, and I think the most kind of applicable aspect is that, so in 2021, Oregon legislature adopted House Bill 3115, which is intended to codify the Ninth Circuit Court's Boise and Grants Pass decisions and provided additional clarity on appropriate time, place, and manner restrictions. House Bill 3115 is now codified as ORS 195.530, and it states, quote, any city or county law that regulates the acts of sitting, lying, sleeping, or keeping warm and dry outdoors on public property that is open to the public must be objectively reasonable as to time, place, and manner with regards to persons experiencing homelessness. And then the bill further says defines, quote, keeping warm and dry to then mean using measures necessary for an individual to survive outdoors, given the environmental condition, but specifically excludes using any measure that involves flame or fire or flame. And
I apologize, Ethan. Could I ask why, in your opinion, and I know this is a subjective question, why is the bill to revoke that in being floated?
There was a in the U.S. Supreme Court in 2024 decision in the Grants Pass versus Johnson case. And so that passed. And so there's been bills that have been put forward by different legislators, and the one that's in front of you today is Senate Bill 593. There's bills on the House side which are the exact same language, so we just stuck with that one, which would then repeal 3115.
3115. Yeah, my question is, why would we repeal it? I know that the Supreme Court decision Bigfoot's what's enforced and what isn't, but do they have something else in mind? I don't understand.
Mayor Knudsen, Councilor Clark, if the question is to me, why would we repeal 3115? I don't have a position on that. I think that's why we're here, to have the conversation put forth to council to deliberate on that.
Thank you, sir.
Other councilors for discussion? Councilor Keating and then Councilor Zelenka.
Thank you, Mayor. It may be very telling that that no lawmakers have signed on as co-chief sponsors or regular sponsors to the Senate component of this bill. On the House side, Ethan, may I ask who's driving this effort in the House of Representatives?
Councilor Keating, I'd need to pull up those bills and see who the chief sponsor is on those. My original review was from some House members from the Republican caucus.
Thank you. Yeah, Mayor, if while we're waiting for that information, and it's not mission critical, Ethan, but I'm curious, and just even that brief answer is helpful. I'm of the opinion that this body should take a no position and a neutral position at worst at this juncture. The neutral would be to learn more and see how this evolves. The no position in that this municipality and previous councils have utilized the time, place, and manner clause or direction appropriately, and to backtrack at this juncture would make me as a community member uncomfortable. So if I were to vote today, I would similarly to our previous conversation, I would toggle between a neutral, and unlike the previous conversation, I would be a no. So as this conversation evolves, my position might evolve, but that's my initial snapshot.
Thank you. And I see that looks like maybe staff has an answer to that question, and then we'll go to Councilor Zelenka and Councilor Evans.
Thank you. Mayor Knudsen, Councilor Keating, on the House side, it's House Bill 2432, and the chief sponsors are Representative Yonker, Mannix, and Deal. And then on the Senate side, there is also a second bill on the Senate side. All three of these bills have the same language, and the chief sponsor is Senator Bonham. And
right,
I wanted to give you that information. Thank you.
That's very helpful in helping me come to a decision where I'm at here. I would encourage colleagues to vote no, as in no support, as in oppose vehemently. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilor Zelenka.
Yeah, well, first of all, homelessness is a world-class hard problem to solve, and we've been working on it, and personally I've been working on it for decades. We are making progress, and we've done a lot of great things in the city of Eugene. I think we're leading the way in a lot of stuff that we're doing, especially with the safe places to sleep. I always felt HB 3115 was pretty problematic in that it's very confusing and it's very hard to enforce. And I'm not sure how it actually ended up playing out. But then then the Supreme Court kind of basically overturned the Grants Pass ruling, and so this bill isn't this bill kind of like housekeeping to align the state law with what the SCOTUS ruling is, and I'm not exactly sure that this matters, and maybe the city attorneys can enlighten us on to whether or not the SCOTUS rule, the Supreme Court of the United States rules end up applying anyway, regardless of what 3115 says.
What?
And so it doesn't really matter.
Well, so it's actually it would be the opposite. So you have the Supreme Court decision that did overturn the Ninth Circuit's decision in Boise and in Grants Pass. That was kind of the underlying basis for the 3115's actions. But, 3115 wasn't, as we talked about back in 2023, when you adopted your code provisions, it wasn't a 1-for-1. That served as the genesis of it, but 3115 did some other things as well beyond those cases. So now that the cases have been overturned, what the Supreme Court says is generally that having regulations that speak to prohibited camping are not unlawful under the Eighth Amendment, cruel and unusual punishment. The Supreme Court specifically said, but, states and local governments can certainly have their own limitations and regulations. And actually, the Supreme Court decision talks about Oregon's 3115 statutes and says, like Oregon has done, you can allow for extra protections. So what the Supreme Court decision said was, you don't have to, but you certainly can. And in fact, Oregon has. So, and then what you all did after with the adoption of 3115 was you adopted kind of that three-legged stool of code provisions that spoke to safety and access and health. And that's where your code sat and sits in light of that. So if 3115 were to say, go away, your code is still there that was based on that three-legged stool of access, health, and safety. And whether or not you would even want to do anything with that would become, again, another separate provision and discussion.
So it doesn't really affect our code, whether or not it gets repealed or not, because it's in our code anyway. And taking another whack at this and figuring this out again would just add to the confusion in my mind. And so I don't think it really matters if it gets repealed or not, because it doesn't really affect what we're doing. I think we should start code. So I could be opposed or neutral.
Thank you. Councillor Evans.
For purposes of discussion, I'll defer to Councilors Kuczynski and Clark because I'm about, and Councilor Ye, because I feel that we're coming to a point where I might be ready to put forth a motion, but I want to hear what everybody else has to say first.
Thank you. Councillor Leach.
Yeah, I oppose the effort to repeal the 3115. While our code is certainly not perfect, and I was planning on asking some of our teams, and I don't think I will actually ask, but how that is going for us, and I think that's a bigger conversation for another day. It's not perfect. We have more work to do here locally. But that's, I think, the point, is that we have the ability to tailor our code to how we need it to be. I think that statewide, we need to keep it as it is right now, and protect some level of state and local city home rule. So I do oppose the bill and appreciate the conversation.
Councillor Kuczynski.
For the sort of purposes of knowing what the motion should be, I will say that I also will oppose the bill, oppose attempting to repeal the bill. I think, having sort of a base, this is the base level across the state, is actually fairly helpful. no matter what they do with repealing it, our code will still be there. But knowing that there's some level of consistency with how we address some of this statewide, I think is helpful, because how different jurisdictions choose to address this issue does have impacts on us. And so that's worth keeping in mind when we think about, do we want some consistency? So, thanks.
Councillor Clark.
Much different from the last two speakers, I suppose I would urge my colleagues to a neutral vote, because it leaves our jurisdiction with the greatest number of options about what we do and what we don't do, and we don't know what it looks like tomorrow as opposed to today. So I would encourage a neutral stance on this, and I hope my friend Greg makes such a motion. Thank you.
Councillor Ye.
Yeah, I just wanted to be helpful to our council president. I'm also in favor of opposing a full repeal at this time.
Okay, hearing that discussion, I think Council President, I'm sorry, just saw your hand go up. Councillor Evans.
Yeah, I did unmute myself. Thank you, Mayor. Given the tenor of the discussion and the temperature in the room, I want to make a motion to oppose the legislative effort to repeal House Bill 3115.
Second.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll take a vote for this motion. All in favor? One, sorry, you're moving around on my screen. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5, all opposed. 1. Did I capture everyone? Did I miss a vote in there?
I believe there was 6 in favor.
6 yeses, thank you. Sorry, you all scrambled on my screen at the same time. So that motion passes with a vote of 6-1. And that concludes our first topic on today's agenda.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Ethan. Doing well on time. I'm going to now turn it back over to our city manager for the second agenda item, city manager update.
Thank you, Mayor. As you know, we occasionally put these city manager updates on the council calendar when we're sometimes unsure of how long a topic's going to take and if there's things that are rising. So this is not, this is likely not going to take the remainder of your council time. But I will say, and I will preface this with what I've said to city staff too. I walk a very careful line about not having my job be political and not talking about, really political issues at work and in city meetings. But we do have to navigate changes in administration and new rules and laws and things that are coming. And I get a lot of questions about that. And so I did want to just acknowledge that several of you have reached out to ask about what's in place to protect Eugenians, in particular immigrants, with potential changing laws and priorities. And so I wanted to just take the opportunity to let you know what you have in place and that you could at least have a conversation about that. So I'm just going to walk through a little bit. There were some actions that council took, and then the state took, and council took, and then there were some actions administratively that the city manager took back in 2017. So in 2017, the city council unanimously passed an ordinance that was really the Protection for Individuals Ordinance. It's a council ordinance number 20579. That ordinance provided certain protections for all Eugene residents, including immigrants, and essentially put provisions of an existing state law into city code. So what you have is not a proclamation or resolution, it's actually in code, preventing the use of city resources, which is any sort of money, equipment, or personnel, to detect or apprehend individuals whose only violation of the law is that they are present in the United States in violation of federal immigration laws. That ordinance also generally prevents city staff from tracking the religious, political, or social views of individuals or groups. So that's the code piece that council did. Subsequent to that, the city manager adopted an administrative order prohibiting city employees from collecting and maintaining immigration status of individuals except in very specific circumstances. Specifically, the administrative order provides that City of Eugene law enforcement personnel shall continue to fully implement the provisions of the Eugene Code sections that are in regards to immigration status information. And in addition, all city employees are prohibited from collecting or maintaining individually identifiable immigration status information unless such collection and maintenance is required to comply with state or federal law, or if the individually identifiable immigration status information is voluntarily provided to the city by individuals. So those are the things that are sort of in place. I know there's other groups in the city and around the state that have been reaffirming their position on items, but I think in most cases, those are areas where they did not adopt something into code. And so that's mostly what I wanted to give you an update and see if you had additional questions or thoughts or things I could follow up on. Thank you.
Thank you, City Manager. I will open the floor for council discussion. Councilor Clark.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, Sarah, I thank you very, very much for reminding us what we passed in 2017. I voted in favor of that, and I'm glad I did. But my question is, we have no provision of current policy or code that is in direct contradiction to any federal law or any federal efforts at this point. Would you say that's correct?
As far as I know, yes.
Thank you.
Councilor Evans.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Again, I think that we need to maintain consistency with what we did in 2017, but going back a little further than that, it's been about 25 years ago, I was coaching soccer in Whitaker, and I had ICE come in and scoop up a number of my players' parents and deport them back to the countries that they came from, whether it was Mexico, Central America, or whatever the case was. And that was a traumatic experience. The kids that I was picking up for games wouldn't open the door for me. Their parents told them, don't open the door for anybody. We're not here. We'll get back to you as soon as we can. And, at that time, I believe, and I may be incorrect about this, the Eugene PD was participating with ICE in that effort to remove, those people from our community. And a lot of those people were doing the hotel work, the restaurant work, a lot of the other work that a lot of people in this community across this country don't want to do. And I really think that we need to be consistent with what we said we were doing in 2017, and that we maintain, our position as a community on, unless, some of these folks are involved in criminal activity, we should not be assisting, ICE in terms of removing these individuals from our community. It creates massive hardship and trauma on families who are just trying to make it in this community. And yes, some of them are illegal aliens, but some are in the process of becoming full-fledged citizens. And I think that we need to be, supportive of that, given the impacts on our workforce and everything else in this community, but mostly the impacts on our families and the families of those individuals who are trying to escape poverty, corruption, and gang violence.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Leach.
Thank you, Mayor. And I agree with Councilor Evans. Definitely supportive of our ordinance, and actually if we have information about how it could be strengthened or how we could do more to provide additional protections for people here in our community. I would be interested in hearing or seeing what that might look like. Obviously, we don't know what is coming. We have very limited information, and what we do have is incredibly scary for many of us who live, work, and play with people in our community, right, that we love and don't want to see have that happen to them, as Councilor Evans had said. So, I mean, and there's even now, I saw some things about officials who actually prevent the having, you know, our enforcement teams work with federal teams could be prosecuted. Maybe Catherine, you could speak to if you have any idea if that could possibly ever happen. So yeah, I mean, I appreciate the topic and I appreciate the ability to, you know, just be able to say, I want to do more. I want to have this body do more to protect people better. And if we can do that, be, you know, supportive of that. So thank you for bringing it up.
Catherine, do you want to briefly respond, City Attorney, to Councilor Leach?
I don't have information that's responsive to that. There's a lot of, we're in this is a very fluid time, both legally and informationally, in the sense that, so it would be very difficult for me to kind of provide any guidance on that. We are very closely monitoring all of this so that, you know, we have the best information. And there's a lot of cities that are in the same exact position, that they have adopted provisions that are identical to the provisions that the city of Eugene adopted. That's helpful for us because you have cities, very, very large cities that are also tuned into the same issue. And so we are making sure we're plugged into that as well so that we can be of the most help to you.
Thank you. Councilor Ye.
Thank you, Mayor, and thanks, City Manager, for bringing this to our attention and for the community to know where we are at the moment. My question is about access to city facilities. I'm sorry, I don't know this ordinance by heart, but is there any way that we can limit access to our facilities or is it more that we just are not going to help, but I would hate for us to be in a position where we're going to hold the door open, but we're not going to help you. That kind of defeats the purpose, but.
The ordinance itself speaks to shall not use city law enforcement monies, equipment, or personnel. So, you know, our facilities, the equipment in our facilities is specifically covered within the confines of the ordinance.
It would be helpful a hypothetical situation. So like someone's at the library, right? And whatever, someone wants to come and apprehend them. Is there anything we would be able to do to stop that or no? Okay.
A member of ICE would have just as much right to be at our library as if it is open to the public. We would not be able to prevent them from coming into a publicly opened area. That's different than coming behind the counter and getting on our computer.
Right. Okay.
So very different.
And so I assume that would extend to places like Lane Community College or University of Oregon, or, I mean, I realize that's not your area. Sorry if I'm asking things that.
I'll jump in there just because my understanding from just talking to other colleagues across the community is, you know, I think what places like that can do is make sure that they have all of the legal documentation and right to be in that space and make sure of that But at some point, if they have all the documentation and legal right and authority and they've crossed all those boxes, they'll have the ability to enter those locations. That's my understanding.
And do we get advanced warning, or is that kind of a thing? I'm sorry, I'm not super familiar. Or is it just they just show up one day? You're nodding yes. Okay.
Well, I think we don't know yet.
Okay. In the past, it's
Yeah.
not something where we received notice, I would assume.
Not that I know of, but I could ask staff to see if we have any experience with that.
I appreciate you answering my questions, as obviously there's a lot to learn about this right now. Thanks.
Councilor Kaczynski.
I want to thank you, City Manager, for bringing this up, for helping both us and our community know what we are doing and what we can do to help protect members of our community. And so I very much appreciate that. I want to echo some of the things that my colleagues said about the importance of, figuring out is there anything else we can do? How can we better protect members of our community? Particularly when we think about other threats that may be coming from different directions as well. And on a slightly different topic, there has been quite a bit of discussion over the past few days regarding particularly funding and grants being revoked and things like that. I'm assuming you and the budget office and finance are all tracking that, or identifying like what grants may be at risk, what funding sources may be at risk, what impacts might be, things like that.
Yeah, and we've been doing that depending on which department since literally kind of day one. I think we got an immediate notification from ODOT around the pausing of funds and trying to understand, like, when does that get clarified, or are we now kind of biting into a construction season? So we're very closely monitoring in every aspect, from a legal aspect to funding aspect. And if there's more or something council can do, we will certainly give you an option to do that.
Thank you.
Councilor Zelenka.
Yeah, just the grants pause was stayed by a court, but just this morning, because of the turmoil and chaos it created, because it wasn't well thought through and it was so incompetently done, the Trump administration rescinded that pause completely. So that's off the table for now, which is good news. This is a kind of it went so far that it was ridiculous. On the broader topic that we've been talking about, I agree with what other city councilors have said, that we should stay the course and keep doing what we've been doing. And I think our 2017 rules I voted for them when we put them forward, and I think they're still the right thing to be doing. And as Councilor Clark said, we're not in contradiction or violating any federal law. So until they do pass something potentially at the federal level, I think we should stay doing exactly what we're doing and protecting those people.
Councilor Keating.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate this conversation and my colleagues' positions. I was not on this body in 2017, but had I have been, I would have voted in the affirmative as well. I'm keenly interested in the more or something this council can do. So it seems like we're in somewhat of a holding pattern, but I appreciate that we're not being silent. Moreover, I want to thank Councilor Evans for sharing such a harrowing personal story. And it reminds me that members of the Latino community have mentioned to me time and again that this is not new, that families have been broken up. Going back to the Obama years, even every administration, there have been
There have been raids in our community that have broken up families. Folks have expressed to me fears of going to the parking lots of Walmart and Target out of fear of being targeted because of the color of their skin. And that's unacceptable in these United States in the 21st century, let alone anytime. It's unacceptable. So I welcome and appreciate the conversation and long to, sadly, we will, not sadly, I welcome the action that this body may take when we know more and we know that something can be done. But I wouldn't want, I suspect and I trust that we're sending a strong signal to the entire community that the breaking up of families in our community is an unacceptable, deplorable practice. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you all. I'm not seeing any more questions from council, and I will just add my appreciation to city manager and staff for the update on this work and also the enormous amount of work that you all have been doing above and beyond what would be typical to try to field and wade through an enormous amount of information and trying to deliver on our very high expectations of public service and professionalism in our community. And I just want to appreciate you all for that because I know it has been a lot. I also just want to add to you all that each of us, as we are out working within community and spending time within community, I've been trying to share updates on this information in person in community groups. And I would encourage you all to do the same, if for no other reason than to be as proactive as possible to help people understand the well-established policy that we do have in place in our community. I issued a joint statement as I was the mayor-elect with our Mayor Lucy Vinis that outlined several of the resolutions, local laws, and the work that this body and councils before it have done related to these issues and the protection of people in our community and our decisions to be an inclusive community and a welcoming community. And I will share that again to this council as a resource because it's a one-page summary that people can have to just understand where we are. But I do think that time just talking with people in community, hearing their concerns, and being able to relay to them that this body and our entire city organization is paying close attention and that we will defend our well-established policies is important. So thank you all. Thank you, council. And with that concludes our agenda for today. So I will now close the January 29th, 2025 City Council work session. We are adjourned and see you all soon.